And we're also joined by my colleagues, Caroline Heffernan and Rory Talon, and a very special welcome to a parent from Cavan, Lorraine O'Neill, who you may recognise from star appearances on television in the not too distant past. Just to say a few things by housekeeping before we start. So just to say that tonight's webinar is being recorded, but if there's anything that you say or add to the chat and you don't want included, let us know and we'll edit that out for the podcast. And also just to remind you that we have a chat function on the side there. And if you want to contribute any questions this evening, please feel free to do so. I know some of you have been very good and you've sent in questions in advance. And we've given those to Eddie and indeed the panel as well. Just to say also that tonight is really focusing on well-being and looking at the light at the end of the tunnel as well. I know you're probably lots of other questions around vaccines and so on, but perhaps to hold off for those questions until a further webinar, until we hear of some further announcements from the HSE on that. But if you have any burning questions, please include them anyway. We'd be happy to hear from you. And we really hope that tonight's webinar will help you to continue to navigate through the next 3 weeks, few weeks and months. I know it's been a really challenging time for everybody. And, you know, I was just thinking that I got my second job today in the Pfizer job, and it was a great relief to me and my family because my wife has got a long-term illness, and although we don't have anybody in our family with cystic fibrosis, I've probably had similar concerns to many of you out there this evening, really, in terms of being really nervous about leaving the house, even meeting up with friends and family and everything. So I think we are moving into a new phase of things, but I know there's still huge amounts of anxiety out there, really, and hopefully, as I said, tonight's webinar will help you navigate through the for the next few weeks and months. So I'm delighted, without further ado, to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, and we're hoping to keep it fairly informal and chatty, and we're delighted that Dr. Eddie Murphy can join us again. Many of us will remember him from a conference that we had a few years ago, and also in terms his very high profile and very well respected in relation to public discussion around well-being and depression and psychology. So over to you, Dr. Eddie Murphy, and thanks again for joining us.
Philip, really appreciate it. And we've a panel here tonight, including Lorraine O'Neill and Caroline, and we're really delighted to be, like they're the individuals I believe that are the true experts on this call tonight. I'll talk a little bit around our well-being, COVID anxiety, but with Caroline and Lorraine here, I just think that we have an opportunity tonight to connect with you, to connect. And one of the things that with this chat function is really think it's important to sort of let's chat in the chat function. So tell us where you're coming from. And I see Rory's joined us as well. So super, full house, full deck of contributors. And so let's put in the chat function. We'd love to see what part of Ireland you're coming from tonight. If anybody is coming from overseas, pop it in there, and we'd love to see that. So we would in the chat function coming up in the timeline. And so I'm going to talk around the whole area about well-being, particularly around anxiety and stuff like that. And then I think what I'd like to get to fairly early is questions and answers, because I think that's where that we can get an opportunity to really engage around Q's and A's. So I see that we have someone from Galway there tonight, and to all, like, one of the values of this Zooming is it's taken a lot of pressure off people. We have a Scottish person, West Lothian in Scotland. It's lovely to have you here, and Grania from Dublin. And so really appreciate you taking this hour or so out and coming and talk to us. And Adele, you're in the Mater Hospital for a night or two. and in from Dublin, and we hope that is only a night or two, and that should be back out. And Sean, you're very welcome as well. So it's lovely to see all the people coming through. And one of the early polls we have tonight, and we're going to show up with only 3, okay, two actually. But one of the early polls tonight is around just their connection with CF, because we know that there are people with CF, family members, etc. So like parents of children. So we'll stick the poll up there and we'll just get a feel for where we're at and who we're talking to. So what's your connection to CF? I'm a person with CF, post-transplant, parent of a young child, parent of a teenager, parent of an adult, spouse, partner, family member, healthcare professional, or other. So and we'll let you fill that out, so we will, and we'd love to see. So just to get a feel for that would be amazing. So I'll take the opportunity to drink a piece of water and we'll do that. So we'll open that poll a little bit just for 30 seconds or so, and get you a chance to click on that. And when I talk about well-being tonight, and we're really going to have this specific focus, obviously, in CF. And just while we're doing that, I'll just give you a sense of a number of years ago in Sligo. I was asked to do a talk at cystic fibrosis in Sligo, and I was very I hadn't really had much connection with CF until that conference, where I met a lot of family members. I remember at the time I started moving the individuals around the room, and I remember someone told me I had a famous last slide in the conference that I threw up, and it was an expletive and CF, and I was sort of a lot of people connected with me afterwards. And I felt I connected with the CF community in that way, because then I would found myself marching around the Orcamby, around the Dáil at the time, and then Bernie, who you'd know, is a walk leader there in Kildare. Susan Kelly from Portarlington, we went speed super value to say hello. And I was walked in the Croatia walk there, and the walking group have a last number of years we were scheduled to go to Bulgaria and couldn't get out, and but that will happen again. So I got pulled into your community through my heart, actually, and I feel very powerful and connected with what you do, and with the struggles of families, really, and the concerns of the families. And so, but there's a part around well-being, and then well-being with CF, and it's something you can't sometimes pull that apart. But it's about and I think Lorraine will talk to you and around how it can't become all of your life. And Lorraine, maybe you could make a comment on that, because I was always very impressed by how with Mia and we met through Operation Transformation. But you know, it was never me a story or whatever. It never became. No. It's how you manage that. I was always very impressed by that, Lorraine. Maybe you could reflect that a little bit.
I think it started when Mia was diagnosed. I was completely ignorant to CF. I hadn't a clue what it was. And then the next thing, like, as every parent that is watching this, or any person with cystic fibrosis knows this, but you're kicked into something very quickly. And I mean kicked. You are kicked into it. And when Mia was diagnosed, she was very sick at the beginning. And I suppose we went through an awful lot that way, that when she got well, I took a big decision that when she was well, I would not forget about CF, but I would always treat her like a child first. And it was a massive thing that I had to do, because I came from a family that, like a lot of Irish mothers are of older generation, but they were very, like when my mum heard the news about me, she told the country, like, you know, and it was this big saga. And I just never wanted CF to to be the biggest thing about Mia. I suppose that's what I didn't want. So yes, Mia has been brought up very much outspoken about CF, but it's not a big deal. When she's sick, it's a big deal.
And I think that, you know, that always, that was like, for me, you know, that really struck with me. And so I want to talk a little bit about well-being, because I want to talk about well-being there's different participants here tonight. Like, if you're caring for somebody or you're concerned about somebody, your well-being matters. So if you're a person with CF, your well-being matters. There we are now. So in terms of the over almost 30% of our people that join us tonight are CF, CF, and 8% post-transplant. We parents of young child, 30%, parents of a teenager, parents of an adult with CF, and we have a couple of other healthcare workers and others. So, and I always remember, and his name escapes me now, he's a transplant, and you'll know who I'm talking about. He's a personal trainer down in Wexford, who's post-transplant.
Can't think of his name.
Lar is his name. Yeah,
Lar, that's it.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, there's just such an inspiring person in that. That's it. Thanks, Samantha. Lar, just the name, just when you're trying to, incredibly inspiring. So where are we at? When we talk about well-being and mental well-being and COVID, and when I talk about, you know, this whole area of impact of this pandemic and how it's impacted on people and how we live with and compartmentalize, then I think of like 5 key areas in our life. I think of if we were to go on and you know, that grass behind me, so I'm going to take on a little journey through a jungle, as it were, or an African safari. And there's 5 major animals if you go on a safari. And in life, if you imagine, there are 5 major emotions in our lives. So if we can manage these emotions in our lives, then we're onto a way of managing our well-being. So you can start popping it into the chat function then. What are the 5 biggest emotions in our life? Think of a child under 5, because what happens is our brain gets more complex, our emotions get more complex. So, for example, emotions like grief, shame, guilt, disappointment, these are sort of, so coming through then, fear, that's absolutely fear, sadness, happiness, love, joy, and happiness, and put them in one area, anger, and the last one is disgust, okay? They're the 5 most powerful emotions in our lives, they're primary emotions. And all our other emotions are linked to them. So when sadness gets problematic, so thanks to that. So when sadness gets problematic, it can be like low mood, depression, bipolar. When anger gets problematic, then that'd be like frustration, irritation, upset. But it sort of feeds into a root of anger. When fear gets activated, and see, with this COVID pandemic, and in the context of people with CF, fear is a very present emotion through stress. Now, we all need stress to get out in the morning. It's just when there's 2 cups of different types of stress. There's eustress, that's the positive, like stress that gets us up, and then distress, when we get overwhelmed with stress. Then stress, worry, anxiety, panic attacks, phobias, generalized anxiety, social anxiety. They're all features of fundamentally fear. Now, I'll just skip to disgust and I'll come back to fear. So disgust then is about body image, body confidence, how a person might say to themselves, like, I'm disgusted with myself or something like that. And these are very powerful emotions. But tonight, really, I know a lot of the questions come in around anxiety, fear. And one of the things is, if I had the power through this magic platform to deliver a snake, a spider, or a rat into where you're sitting now, what would you do? So you can tap it into the chat function. You can get tapping there. So I'm throwing a spider, and throwing a rat out there, what would you do? Fortunately, like, I know Lorraine would be doing something there with that rat, but
Gossiping.
so
No,
run away,
indeed with that
cry,
plan.
okay. They'd run, and so a lot of running going on here. Jump a mile. What else would you do? So we're getting it. What we do is our reaction when our fear and stress can be activated, particularly a lot of stress, would be we have fight, flight, and freeze. Okay, do we either turn and smack it, or we run away really fast, or for sometimes we might freeze? So Samantha needs throwing it back at me. Thank you very much, Samantha. It's okay, it's a tame one. I keep them in the cage for the next talk. And in the context of fight, okay, or flight. And this is the sort of crux of what I want to get at tonight. Most fear is dealt with through avoidance, that we avoid the situation. We avoid, now it makes perfectly sense. If you think about COVID and that we 2-meter distancing, we wear our masks, we wash our hands, and we're in that, and that's healthy strategy, if that makes sense. But we're now in, and this is where I think our Q's and A's come up, we're now in a situation where we're at some level, people are re-entering the world, as it were, post-vaccination, but kids haven't been vaccinated. And some people are a little bit stuck as well. They want to try push the boundary and go back into the social world, but their fear is overwhelming and they're using avoidance as their strategy. So what I'd like to do is bring now Caroline and Rory in and just get a sense of where they're at now and what's their big concerns now and stuff like that. So I'll bring ladies first. We'll bring Caroline in there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eddie. I suppose we kind of have to go backwards a little bit to go forwards, as in where do we go from here? For me, I mean, everything you were saying that, about the rat, maybe running away from it, I suppose you could actually look at CF being that. So through my life with CF, what I've actually done is made friends with CF, if that actually makes sense, and become also independent of it. So I'm my own person, a bit like what Lorraine said. For me, like obviously when you're well, you're well. When you're sick, you have to deal with it. But what I found is, for me to have a calm mind, I actually have to do my best for me. So my best for me would be very different from maybe everyone else here in the audience. So for me, if we went back to the beginning of COVID, my husband works with vulnerable people, and we had to decide whether he went to work or whether he stayed at home to protect them and to protect me. And we kind of looked at it and goes, how long is this going to last? Is that really a good option? We decided against it. We then thought maybe I could move in with my mum, because she was also an OAP, so she would be a vulnerable member of the community, and Franny would go and do the groceries, and so on and so forth, or my sister. And then I was thinking, I can't do that because Anna my youngest, was supposed to be doing her Leaving Cert. And I just said, I can't move out and have her at home. Now, she could have come with me, I suppose, but I just thought it was very unfair to opt for the upheaval. So what we decided was, our third option was that we would all stay at home and we would social distance within the house. So I moved out into the spare room because Franny was the one that was going out doing all the shopping, going to work, and everything else that had to be done. And I was at home and I was working or exercising. And I was able to share that bubble with Anna. So there were some really good positives out of, say, the initial first 3 months. We had some lovely evenings together because there was nothing else to do. So she was stuck with mum, which was really good. But there was also the negatives, and the big negative for me, which everyone would have heard me moan about for the last 15 months. The initial 3-4 months, I couldn't see my grandson. So I empathized with every grandparent in the country. It was horrendous. Now, he was young enough not to know that Nanny was going, stop, you can't come in. Whereas if that was now, it wouldn't be an option, because it's take the hand and off we go. So I think I calmed myself because I made the right decision for me. And because I made that decision, I was happy in my skin. and I was happy cocooning, because I do think that people with CF are very resilient, and we were practiced for this. I mean, I have 50 years practice realistically. So it wasn't, it was hard, but it was something I was prepared for. And I think if you're prepared for something, you can overcome it without a doubt. I am a bit nervous now going forward. I am vaccinated, but I'm still in my bubble. I have 2 friends. I have a fitness bubble, and I don't actually go outside that as of yet. And if I'm being a bit sneaky as well, I still haven't gone back shopping. So there's a plus to COVID.
That's laziness, Caroline.
He's just such a wonderful man. Yeah.
Caroline, are you still doing the bubble in the house then?
Yeah, we're still not as strict as it was initially in the first 3 to 6 months.
Separation in the house.
Yeah, we were separated, not as much now, not now.
Okay. Yeah.
But we were, yeah. So now we're obviously interacting in the house. But you get very comfortable in your own space. So this room that we're in now, behind the computer is my bike, and to my right is my treadmill. So I kind of live in this, and the telly, of course. So I kind of, this is my space now. So I suppose what I would be afraid of, and it was a question that we were going to bring up later, is you get used to your COVID cocooning as your norm. And that's not my norm, because I was very much a social butterfly, you know what I mean? Any excuse to go out. And now I'm kind of going, do I really have to? You know, do I really need to? So it would be good to see what you think about that, you know, maybe to give me.
So I suppose the thing about that is about your, like, let's say, quality of life, because we know that for a lot of people that could go, like the process of whatever, keeping themselves safe, meant that in a level of isolation. And for some people, like if there's no impact on your quality of life, Caroline, you're happy doing what you're doing, that's fine. But if you're looking at the 4 walls in that room and the bike and the treadmill and sort of a little bit flat mood, not as bubbly as yourself, or concerned about the social engagement, etc. Like, so then you're sort of moving into that. Possibly, I'm not saying this for you now, but I'm just saying for some people, it could be a level of like isolation, sadness, loneliness, and it goes into the sad part of it, or fear, anxiety. How much do I step out? And I get into some of the approach avoidance strategies, because, and this is, it's challenging around if avoidance is triggered on real fear, which there is a natural real fear a person has CF, and then if it's amplified by psychological fear, and then we'll try and tease that out. But I'd be very interested to bring Rory in now, and if you have questions for us now, you can remember you can pop them through the chat function, and that's great. We'll pick them, maybe we'll get to those a little bit later. But this is what I'm trying to do: is I'm trying to create this conversation where we're here, you can see us, but also you're there as well. And we want to ensure that coming off this tonight, if you have questions that you need asked, I'm not a medical doctor, and so around vaccination and stuff like that, that's not really. I think there's a follow-up webinar being done by CFI Ireland around that. But Rory, we'll bring you in and just take.
I mean, it's been a very challenging time for everyone, so I'm no different, and it's been challenging for me as well. But everyone's, I suppose, family situation, you know, and health situation or living quarter situation is a bit different. So my own personal details are: I live with my wife. She's a secondary school teacher. I have 2 primary school children. And I'm the one, so I work part-time, and then I bring them to school in the morning. I collect them from school and all that. So, you know, I had all, you know, my wife would call me quite a worrier or quite anxious. You know, she thinks I get a bit too anxious. But from my perspective, like, I would see that I don't, like, I worry about logistics, but I don't worry about, so I worry about the small logistics, how to do this, when to do this. But I don't get consumed by the fear of COVID. So just before COVID arrived in March of last year, we had got a new dog, a little puppy, because we'd been promising the girls, and we got him end of January, early February, and then the whole country closed down in March. But we had this dog, and he had to be walked 3-4 times a day. And So for me, practically, I never isolated myself. Like I was always out walking the dog, and it was predominantly me walking the dog. So as Caroline said, you know, with CF, we were prepared for cross-infection management, risk management. You've acquired it as a skill, as a life skill over the years of attending hospitals and infections. So for me, you know, in the very first weeks of March, when the whole country was in a state of fear, you know, for me, I walked the dog, but I might, you know, if I passed someone on the street, I would have given myself extra clearance from them, you know, to either cross the street or whatever. And then as time went on, I realized, well, that's actually not necessary. I can be a bit more, you know, I don't have to be as stringent as that, you know, because all the science was changing all the time, all the government advice was changing all the time, and so on. And then even now, it's clear that, you know, fresh air and air circulation and so on is the key to managing this thing. So for me, like I was always out walking the dog, and I you know, I went to the shops, I went to my pharmacy, even at the time of lockdowns and so on, but I had my mask. And I made sure it was the FFP2 mask, because, you know, with CF, you're used to higher quality infection control procedures. And I didn't trust the shop supplied alcohol gel. I had my own little bottle of alcohol gel all the time. I was also bringing my children to the GA, because GA was still running as of up to October, late October last year. So I was bringing them, and it was closed down for periods and back on again. And even now, actually, it's opened back up again. And I'm now training as a mentor with one of the underage groups. So like, you know, although I do worry about COVID, but I bring my own bottle of alcohol gel. I always have a mask with me, and I try to manage the risk scenarios in all situations. And I do avoid unnecessary risk. If I go into a shop, milk, and it's really wedged or crowded, I'll just walk out and I'll go to a different shop, you know. So I try to take control of the situation. At the back of my mind, I am anxious about it, I am worried about it, but I try not let that consume me, or you know. So my lifestyle hasn't changed dramatically because of lockdowns, apart from not being able to travel down the country, see my parents, and things like that.
So what there is we've a sphere of uncertainty, and a sphere of control. And if we're living our space of our life, as it were, in this uncertainty all the time, our anxiety can start going free flowing. What you're looking at there is the risk, like you're, in a way, your alertness, and as Caroline says, that you know, knowing the whole area of cross infection, and probably the likelihood is you bring some forward strategies of the mask wearing and hand gel in a sort of going forward model, I'd imagine, because it just makes good sense to do that. That you've created a sense of risk management, and one of the things is around this sphere of concern and then the control, and trying to stay in that sphere of control is one of the challenges. In a way, if we can manage that, it will help to minimize our levels of distress or stress. We're going to pop our second and final poll tonight, because what we'd like to look at is this whole area. How stressed have you been over the last 15 months? And we'll just put that up there now, if you don't mind. And then this will be our. So how would you rate your levels of stress over the last 18 months? And so we'll get you to pop it in there. And
can I ask, is Caroline, are you still afraid?
I'm not afraid, because I'm quite good at risk management, but I don't see any point in putting myself at added risk. Plus, I'm fitter than I ever have been during the lockdown, and I'm comfortable with what I'm doing, and I'm comfortable with the people that I'm doing it with, because they have committed for other reasons to be in my exercise bubble. I have no problem standing outside talking to people. And if I'm very honest, I mean, Rory, I mean, you're making me look very bad. I mean, I'm being lazy. I could quite easily go to the shop, and if I have to, I will. But Franny is doing it. I'm being very honest.
I knew that, Caroline. I knew it was laziness.
Yeah,
but
pure laziness. Yeah.
I would be. I know I would be more like Rory. Like, I would kind of look at a situation and I judge it. And then I'd see, would I bring Mia into it or not? I know at the beginning, at the first lockdown, I was very nervous. And then like we were going for walks and we were doing stuff here, but I knew Mia was kind of, she wasn't at school obviously like anybody else, but she wasn't seeing her friends, and I could feel her just changing. And then she said to me, can I see my friends? So what I did was I got in touch with 2 of her friends' parents, and I just said, you know, are they mixing with others? What are they doing? And when we decided that they weren't mixing, the 3 girls mixed, and I found it, I found that was my savior, that I could give Mia back a little bit of normality. Now I know now, like this, I'm talking when did we close? March last year. So I probably done this last June, that I allowed her to see her friends again. But like I get what both of you are saying. Like I would still be careful, but I still would, you know, I still go out, and I still let Mia go out.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. It's hugely important that everyone you still go out.
And my 2 children as well.
Worry around the hand gel and face masks there came through.
Sorry, what?
So the question was, let's have a look. Do you feel well protected with your mask and hand gel?
I feel that's our best armament, that and social distancing, and you know, taking yourself out of high risk situations as much as possible. And beyond that, you know, you can't control the universe, if you understand. So you have to accept that life is life, and that's sort of my philosophy, that you can't control every single thing around your life. So even today now, we had to bring one of my daughters over for testing because she had a sore throat and cough and headache last night, and they're out of school today. So we don't know, that could be COVID. We don't know. You know, you can't. You have to get on with things, is my perspective.
We comment here that a mum of 2 young girls, both with CF, and the more it opens up, the harder I find it. Places are busier, people are less aware, and people seem to be slipping back into the norm. We're still high risk and finding it tough to know what's right for our girls. And I think that's finding the balance on that. And you see, I'd love to say there's a real sort of black and white answer. But like what I take there from Lorraine is, Lorraine looked at the sort of social impact on Mia and made a decision around managing some of that. And I think this goes back to this control. Another question is, Eddie, can you give us some tips and advice on moving forward, how to cope with the stresses? So in a way, so this avoidance, the problem with in a normal world, I'd always say avoidance always keeps fear going, right? Avoidance fuels fear. So for example, if you kept for the rest of your life or in your family's lives as sort of a seal of social distancing, people out, then you can have a very unrewarding, unprotected, a very protected life, but a very unrewarding sort of life. And I'd love to say that there's hitting the balance on that, because that brings up then if a child got sick, then there's parental guilt, and I think it's a real challenge, you know. But I think we have to nail and we have to look at the whole area of avoidance, right? Because from a psychology point of view, avoidance will always keep fear going, and that's why if you're engaged in, and I mean, like if somebody is really reluctant to get back out, I think it's getting back out in a very controlled, staying in that space of what we can control, trying to limit as best we can, the pods or the bubbles that the kids are in. And you know I don't know, sometimes children maybe in an urban community might have more social connection than those that might be living out in the country, and there could be just cousins coming in and out, or 1 or 2 neighbors. So I'd love to say it depends, but avoidance has to be named. That avoidance will always keep fear going. Now, I always believe in the wisdom of the tribe. And we've 30% of people in this room here with us, virtual room, experience CF or have CF. So you tell me how you're managing. What stress management strategies would you do? What advice would you give to that parent, Caroline? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to my first, comment about me calming my mind. It's about making the right decision for me. And that's not going to be the same for everyone. But I suppose maybe it came across that I don't go out. It's about being aware of your surroundings. And I definitely wouldn't be saying, you know, don't go out. I mean, all of my friends, like they all know I have CF. So take COVID out of the scenario, none of them will come into my house if they're feeling sick or unwell. So I suppose I've given the message all through my life that I have to be careful with cross-infection.
So let's take this moment now of a young child and just say, I don't know, that it's sort of new emerging, like it's only maybe 8 years or something like that in that family's life cycle, and it's around. First of all, can you be assertive in the communication about what you're putting out there? So here's another mom. I'm a mom of a 6-year-old. Thanks, Sarah. Boy, let me just open up. I'm going to open up this chat function now and just read some of this chat. Let me just find it. Sorry, bear with me here. I'm a mom of 6-year-old boy with CF. We've been very cautious, but many of my friends have not. And this is where families with CF have to be very cautious, and some not. I've avoided them completely because they're anti-vax and we're not following any of the guidelines. They spoke about anti-COVID, and I needed to leave group chats because it's upset me being a mom of CF. To be honest, I'm not sure. Do I want these continue these friendships? Is this wrong? Well, look, I'm going to be straight up here, right? Because I mean, I work in the science community. I work as a healthcare professional. My wife, Carol, has a vulnerability. She's post-cancer treatment. So, and there's a family friend of ours now who's considering the whole vaccination. Everybody else in our family is sort of involved in healthcare, and everybody's being vaccinated. But I would have concerns for individuals who were proactively anti-vaccine, and in the context of if I was managing a child or a parent of a child with CF, I think it would be very natural to be considering a number of those factors around, particularly because we know the vaccine works because it reduces admission. We know it works because it breaks the chain of transmission. And that's it. So at the moment where I am with this person is there, we meet even though you're allowed to meet internally, we meet externally, and that's the way it works. Because I just think the vulnerability, they're bringing a level of vulnerability into the circle, as it were. I sound like Meet the Fockers, where your man talks about the family into the circle. Remember the circle of trust. But I think what you're questioning, I think your question is okay. I would be distressed if I was a parent. I would be distressed as a healthcare worker on that. Particularly if there was engagement within my family. Rory, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just going to read out another question that's related, okay? And it's coming through from myself and Caroline, so I'll just read it. It says, Rory and Caroline, you both said as people with CF, you knew how to isolate, but was it different because it wasn't just you isolating, it was the whole family? So it's all very related. So thoughts on, I think if you know, one of the things I felt was disgust. So a level of disgust that people who were blatantly not following the health guidelines, you know, walking into shops without wearing masks when you know the whole lockdown policy was to wear a mask going into shops. People, you know, teenagers gathering in crowds, no masks, no social distance. You know, I felt a bit of disgust at that, but at the same time, I told myself, well, I can't control them, but I can maintain my social distance from them and at least protect myself. So with me, the whole thing was about managing my own little myself, you know, the risk around myself. And in terms of the whole family, isolating the whole family, that, you know, that was difficult for the whole country when we were told, you know, there was a level 5 lockdown, only go for essential journeys to, you know, so it was difficult trying to occupy children. I said I have 2 primary school children who and then the whole homeschool, and that was very stressful, trying to work and do the homeschool and so on. But the element of trying to keep them in and not allow them play with their friends during the first periods of the lockdown, that was very difficult. And then gradually we relaxed that a bit as a family, and we're in an urban area, so they were able to go out. I let them outside to play with friends, but they were playing with the same 2 or 3 friends, and they were playing outdoors. So again, it was managing it, you know, opening up the world a little bit and trying to manage it. all the time anxious at the back of the mind, all the time concerned that possibly COVID will come in. But you know, you had to allow the children a bit of space as well, because keeping them in the house was detrimental. Yeah.
If I could just actually add to that, I suppose it was a bit weird, ironic, funny. I'm not sure what the right word is to use, but normally when we're isolating, we're normally sick. So I suppose the one thing that was a little bit weird was the fact that, you know, I was well. So I was well and I was kind of cocooning and I was keeping myself isolated. But other than that, it didn't bother me. I quite enjoyed the family time with Anna and that during lockdown. But I think everyone felt like, from talking to people, from other people with CF, they actually felt like they weren't missing anything. You know, because sometimes when you're sick and you're not getting to go out with your friends, you know, you can't go because you're sick. But now no one could go out, so you weren't missing anything, if that sounds right. And then just quickly, I just wanted to add into about the lady that was worried about is she wrong to kind of come off the WhatsApp with friends that were being a little bit disrespectful. To be honest, I would not be a friend with anyone that is not respecting my CF. Whether they're vaccinating, they believe in it or not, I wouldn't be friends with them. I mean, I believe true friends stand by you no matter what, and they have to make you laugh. I mean, I'm a firm believer you should laugh every day. So I would have no hesitation to walking away from those people. And you know, if they ask why they're not being respectful towards you, that's just, I would be quite strong on that. I think
our fabulous contributor, one of our, I don't know if everybody see the chat. I'm not sure in the webinar, but one of the things that one of the individuals said, that parents should keep away from the anti-vaxxers. They don't respect their daughter's health, and they don't respect that family, their family as well. And I think that's put really well. Thanks so much for putting it in there. Another question coming, because I want the questions coming in through. Go ahead there, yeah.
One thing I was going to say was when families are worried about letting their children out, I would go back to before COVID, and if your child is well, you let them have a normal life, right? And if your child is sick, you don't, you know, you keep them away, you guard them, and you do whatever else. And I would say that that's how I would deal with COVID as well with Mia. Now, I always say I only tell my own story, but I know if Mia is doing well, which she is at the minute, she's doing great, I will let her have a normal life as our new normal, what our normal is now. So I would let her go to school. I would let her play with her friends. I would let her go to train, and I would let her do all that kind of stuff. And that would be my advice to CF parents. Now, that's only my opinion. But I would, because when a CF child is well, you know, they're in far better form. Definitely if they're sick, I would keep them away from others. But I would still have that circle for parents asking there, what should they do, and sending them to school and all the rest. If your child is well, the chances are they're going to be okay. Wearing a mask, there was a question there about a mask. I have always, from dot, made Mia wear a mask if we were on a hospital visit, if we were definitely flying. I have never really bought her on a bus, to be honest. We live in the country, there's no need. But when we're flying, Mia always wore a mask. So I think the mask thing going forward, you know, in situations where you feel you need your child to wear a mask, wear a mask. And I think we'll all be the same. Like, I'm a hairdresser, and I don't think we will ever cut hair again without wearing a mask. I don't think customers will have to wear it, but I don't think as a hairdresser that we will cut hair again without wearing a mask.
So really, thanks so much, Lorraine. I just think that's so helpful, because it supports families in their decision making. And I'm not sure, sometimes families can be a little bit isolated. And I hope they're getting support out of this call tonight from what I call the real experts in the room here. One of the things is around them, will we continue to wear masks when we're back to normal? I love everybody wearing masks. So it was a breakthrough for us, and tried to get Billy to wear them before he wouldn't. Will it be wrong to continue wearing masks? I think, well, definitely not wrong to continue wearing masks. And the quality, remember that FFP2 mask, that's the mask that you want to be wearing. Like, it's not all masks are the same, and it's them FFP2 masks that are have the strongest quality. I mean, for out and about normal, that's the mask rather than just a traditional face covering mask, which really it's the FFP2. That's the one that it is, and I'm sure you've been through that within the community about the quality of masks and stuff like that. In terms of, I think I'll always wear a mask now on a plane. I can see that going forward. That'll be just a given that I'll wear a mask on a plane. And I think you'll find over time people will wear masks, but they'll wear masks for different reasons. Some people will be anxious and wear masks. Some people will have a hangover from COVID, wear masks. Some people will wear masks because they have an active cold, maybe, and they're out in the public space. So, but wearing the FFP2 mask, I think it can be a game changer for families. I would still be nervous. I just want to tackle this one from Susan. I'd still be very nervous about going to shops. My son is fully vaccinated since last Wednesday, and the rest of us had our first vaccine. The stress levels are very high, and I'm dreading my son. So he's 19. So that's this trade-off between a 19-year-old going out, and if you think about it, like I think about COVID, it's restricted people at different ages and stages in life. And these young adults who need to get out and meet and connect and get away from their parents and do all the things that is really important for young adults to do, that's all being disrupted, and the flow that's been disrupted. So I get your worry for him, but is he worried, and has he got sort of and in a way it's about, of course, like I call it the golden handcuffs. You'd love to keep him in and keep him safe, but would that make him happy? So it's about maybe trusting his decision making around that. And like sounds like your second vaccine will come in soon as well. There were some parents who let their CF children back to school. So I don't know if we've, and I get that, I understand that. So are still, I wonder if there's anyone on the call tonight. I mean, you don't have to say it if you're struggling around that, let school, but where will we be in September and returning to school? Because I think this is the thing, if they're well and it's school is managed and you have a discussion with the principal and the class teachers, and lots of air going in and ventilation at school and stuff like that, I think it's critically important. Have that conversation.
At school, Mia had a screen around her. Like, she went to school, but they put a screen around her when she was sitting in class, and then they left her near a window. She was fine. She didn't even have a sniffle this year. Yeah. I know that's lucky, and that's not everyone's situation, but yeah, definitely. I sent her off, and they had a screen around her when she was sitting in the classroom.
Again, it's practicalities, small practical steps you can take to sort of reduce the risk a bit as much as possible within what you can achieve.
Staying in that circle of control. I just want to do a big shout out to Adele. Adele is getting used to having, because she's come out from a 2-year stay in hospital, and she was surrounded by fully vaccinated staff for the last 5 months or more, and was at ease. And well, first of all, Adele, I think the whole of us want to wish you well, and I think that coming out from hospital after a 2-year stay, there's an adjustment there. That's like it would be natural to have an adjustment. Sometimes we call that an adjustment reaction, where you would be trying to adjust to this newfound situation. It's like I was a nurse, a general nurse, so I worked in intensive care and different wards, and before I was a psychologist. And if we had someone in intensive care and they were moving to the ward, there was always a level of anxiety because there was less staff around the ward. It was a good sign you were moving in that direction, but there was a massive adjustment and fear as well. So I want to wish you a lot of luck, and that you're still getting used to, well, you're coming out from a 2-year stay in hospital, so you're getting used to a society that's fundamentally changed in a way.
Eddie, could I maybe ask a question there, just if you don't mind, just while I think we've gone through the questions that are just popping up on the chat. I was just wondering, when we were talking, I suppose it's the rolling ball of negativity. In the morning you stub your toe and then you might burn your toast, and then, there's no diesel in the car, and everything just kind of starts to get more and more stressed. So that's just, I suppose, a very simple kind of stress. I suppose it's just getting bigger as the day goes on. Have you any tips or techniques that we can actually maybe stop that at the stub your toe kind of moment, just so that, you know, all of this, the questions in relation to stress, I'm just wondering, is there...
Okay, so one of the ways to think about it is, like, if you measure 0 to 100, if you were to rate your stress now, give yourself a number, not you, anyone that's on the call here, and then I go, well, how can you, say you were a 60 or an 80, how can you move that by 20 down? What do you need to do straight away to do that? Because most people, so we know that being out in nature, like in terms of nature-based solutions, being outside in the powered, and you see the green all around me, because it has a soothing component. It's not like Funny Who Shrunk the Kids and their mower is going to take my head off in any minute, but it's like nature-based solutions can really be powerful in reducing our levels of stress, whether it's being in water or being out in nature, connection with families and relationships and others, around practicing or learning skills around mindfulness, about being in the present. Like if you think about, so Rory, you have a little dog there, I have a little dog at my feet here, but when they're out, they're not thinking about the future, they're not thinking about the past, they're just in that moment. And the more often we can try and, so if we're in all the time around being worried about the future of being ill with CF, or we're worried about the future being, like I think of Lar again. I think Lar is engaged in training. He's engaged in looking at his lung function. He's engaged in keeping ahead, so medical advances will sort of support him in the future. So he's very much in the now. So having that component of being in the now can and stop. You know, there's a style of thinking called catastrophizing. Okay. And this is a style of thinking where if something happens, like you stub a toe or burnt a toast, and then, oh, that's it, the whole day is gone or whatever, that it's sort of like this catastrophizing thinking. So how do we get into a space that, excuse me, we're not engaged in scaremongering, scaring ourselves or catastrophizing? Because if we look at, okay, we'll be serious, but we'll have to deal with that when we get to it. But what can we control now? What is it that I can control now? So I can control, I can learn some mindfulness. There's a program called Mbsr, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. For children, it's called Stop and Breathe. And it's a program, simple breathing, some podcasts in that area around being able to understand our thinking and stuff, like from more maybe 13 upwards, and say, okay, that's just, what drives our emotions is our thoughts. And if we sometimes, particularly when anxiety, it's very future-based. Sadness, regrets are very past-based. But like fundamentally, if we're worried and anxious about getting COVID infection, that's a future-based thought. And it's really, hold on now, that's not the way I am now. Where I'm at now is, where I am now is I'm well, I'm healthy. I know what I need to do with that. Now, what other part of my life gives me meaning and engagement? And this is the thing, is that if we live our life about avoiding infection and being labeled by the label of CF, then the CF becomes bigger than our life. And I suppose I'm appealing to people that it's sort of part of your life because you can't ignore it, but it doesn't become all of your life. And I think that's the key message that Lorraine would say. But I'm saying that as an outside-in person. Does that make sense? Well, I'm listening to Lorraine saying that, and Rory and Caroline, you saying that from the inside out. You can't let it, you do your best not to be overwhelmed by it. But there's times you will get, if you get sick, you'll get overwhelmed by it. Yeah. But then I look at so strategies around thinking tools, breathing tools, nature-based solutions, positive, like family and friends. The role that exercise plays, obviously it plays a huge role anyway around lung function, but it has mood boosting effects and stuff like that. So they're all, so you can change how you think about the situation. You can enhance your resilience in advance of a situation through some of those mechanisms that we've discussed. And then, and you got to figure out then what type of relaxer are you? Some people are, because one thing is when you're stressed, your immune system is activated. When your immune system is very activated, it actually goes down over time because there's toxic levels of stress, and you don't necessarily want ongoing all the time stress. And if you're living that stress for your son or daughter all the time, then you're going to, in a way, and you're going to have a level of transference of that anxiety onto your son or daughter, you know. So it's a potential for that. So it's about finding ways to manage that anxiety, and that's what I mean by those nature-based solutions. Those using exercise, using cognitive behavioral therapy, thinking differently, strategies like, am I engaged in scaremongering there? Am I talking about something in the future? What do I need to do right now? Is there people in my life, like wise people in my life? What would they do now? And some of those questions can be answered that way.
Thanks for that, Eddie.
No worries, yeah. I just want to go through a couple of questions for Fabulous. I think we should save these questions. My daughter's 25, is CF, is fully vaccinated very well. She's decided to go to London, having endured 16 months in isolation. Any suggestions for my anxiety? And that's really about, you know, well, are you concerned that she's going to go, like, that's a person who's embraced the way she wants to live. I was 18-year-old and I went to London true. That's how I went. I emigrated when I was 18, and I know as your daughter being out, so the components of that is just like she's out of your bubble, out of your control. But in a way, that can be some of the best growing up or the best decision that your daughter's made for her, and that's and it's maybe finding that trust in yourself, and then maybe some things around. One of the things I would say there is around checking, right? So when it comes to anxiety, I talked about the role of avoidance. Now I'm going to talk about the role of checking and reassurance seeking. But you might ring your daughter every day, and then she mightn't ring you. She might want to ring you every day. She might want to ring you every third day or something like that. And then you're ringing and checking, and you're wondering what's going on. And checking behavior enhances and increases that fear. So be flexible about the calls and the check-ins. But if you're continually checking, that's an anxiety-based behavior. You need to know that. 16-year-old won't embrace screen around them as much as parents would love it. I'm not sure.
Neither did a 12-year-old or she's nearly 13. She didn't want it either, but she got it.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really,
yeah.
So that's the way. Yeah, that's how I see it now.
I can come in here if you want.
Who wants to be different? Really, you're 16-year-old. You don't want to be. You don't want to be treated any differently. But I'd say, like, at the end of the day, that's a school policy, and that's, you know, sometimes it's like it probably even is questionable to value the screen in one way, but that's the school policy, and that's the way they're going to work it. You know.
Yeah, as a 13-year-old, I wouldn't have been happy with that.
I was going to come in and say, as a person with CF, you don't want to be treated. You want to be treated as normal as possible. You don't like to be standing out as the sick person in the class or anything. You know, you want to be as normal as possible. And
she didn't, Rory, and she didn't like it. But that was the school policy.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I give her the option that she could stay at home and be homeschooled.
Yeah.
She wasn't long liking it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know it's not nice standing out. And she's in 6th class, so she's at that stage where, you know, there's a lot of things that aren't so cool anymore. And the screen around her, she hated it, you know, and she gave out about it every day. And I just said, well, I'll homeschool you.
Yeah.
And then, do you know, it's gas, because since the last term, she never complained about it once. The first term, she hated it. And every evening, I hate that screen. I'm not going back to school. But that was the way it was. And I know 100% you don't want to stand out as a CF. But unfortunately, there's a lot of things with COVID that you don't want to do. And we've been pushed into it. And that's the way I would feel.
Yeah. There's one more question here on that I see in a question and answer dialogue. And it's about feeling isolated. Because people they've struggled with friendships, you know, friends who didn't follow guidelines, so, you know, they're feeling quite isolated as the country moves on a bit. So I don't know, is there any tips for that?
So people have moved on, but just elaborate.
I'll read it. I've also struggled with friendships who didn't follow guidelines. I feel isolated now as we move on. That's the question.
Yeah, but I suppose is there in the risk management world, you know, is that person not engaging, going out? Can they re-engage or reconnect? Can they reconnect in a safe way? Can they control the environment that they reconnect in? I'm reading one here, which I think is, I just want to get to because it's, we're the opposite. The 19-year-old who wants to go out. So now we've a person, remember we've the parent worried about the 19-year-old going out. Now we've the person whose daughter is suffering with anxiety and doesn't feel up to going out. A completely different girl before the lockdown. How can we help her? She saw a psychologist but won't go again. Like, so sometimes when you go see a counselor, psychologist, and you don't connect, if you don't connect, but sometimes it just takes a little bit more, like, and that's the avoidance that I'm talking about. And that avoidance and fear, and I don't know if that 90-year-old is now vaccinated. I suspect she would be, I would say have vaccination. So, and then we have, it's been a nightmare mentally, physically, and emotionally challenging our CF, who got very bad anxiety out of the blue and was a completely different child which floored the house. Then she got vaccinated, grabbed the boots, joined the gym, and now is out and about and living his best words, his best life. So there's two people who, one sounds male and a girl, and obviously a boy and a girl, and the boy went down, got vaccinated, grabbed his boots, but he internalized his anxiety but didn't express it out. Eventually got vaccinated, is out. But this is a girl who's, again, is experiencing anxiety. So I don't know what you see. I often wonder there, right? Okay, there's the professional help, which is important, right? But also, is there somebody there who could, that a close friend or a cousin or somebody in our life that is safe, if you know what I mean, we can start moving out in a control fashion. So the psychology would be called a graduated exposure. That's what we would do when people have panic attacks and anxiety. We want them moving out into that situation, but we don't get them out into full-blown situations. So what we do is we sort of do what called graduated exposure. So it could be that we go in the car and we go to, like, go out, and we might go for a quiet coffee in a place that's maybe not as busy and stuff like that. Might sit out and do that with a family member, increase the time out, increase maybe the variety of the places you go out to. Is there another person then, like a older family member, a close friend, but it's done in a more controlled manner during maybe a quieter part of the day? And you do this ladder of exposure, and that's how we would do it from and that person would be the hub of that, making decisions around that. So that's the strategy for that 19-year-old.
Yeah, just on that, actually, Eddie, it's 19-year-old is the actual sibling that's going out with CF, and it's a younger 13-year-old that's having the anxiety. So I presume it would be the same techniques that you would actually that you would use.
So say that again, the 19-year-old?
So the 19-year-old female is actually going out. She's vaccinated and going out. It's the younger sister who also has CF. That's the one that has anxiety. So I suppose there's probably sibling conflict because one is going out because they're vaccinated and the other one is staying at home, or is at home and a little bit more anxious.
Okay, but it could be that, like, is the 19-year-old, is the perception that the 19-year-old is being unsafe and bringing something back from home? It's hard to know the unique situation there. Or is there, like, just like, if you think about it, when you're 13, it's a more vulnerable age for a girl, actually. Like, you've sort of like for boys or girls, onset of like puberty and teenagers. Quite often there's a transition in the schools, and we won't get into the school disruptions that young people have had, but you've multiple transitions going on there, and you've very powerful messages going to that 13-year-old at 11 and a half, a year and a half ago, saying, like, this is, the world has gone upside down here. So we got to figure the messages that were given out at the first round of COVID are not the active messages that are going in now, that they're changed, that the amplification has changed on that. And So that's sort of important. And then doing the graduated exposure with that 13-year-old, it would be the same, but would be done differently in a way that they'd be going to different places, as it were, that 13-year-old would go to.
That's great. And I noticed Philip came on, so I know we're getting close to the end. Just, Eddie, we had actually mentioned, you know, coughing as, you know, before COVID, you know, if you were on the bus and you were coughing or whatever, it does tend to kind of, sometimes it embarrasses people, or we don't just cough normally. It's like, it's quite, it can be quite a vicious cough. And I suppose the way people would interact, I mean, before COVID, you'd get the look as if like, you know, what's wrong with you? But now with COVID, and we were discussing this previously, you know, the anxiety now that if you're a person with CF and you know that it's your CF, that the cough is, and other people are now going to perceive it as COVID and maybe be rude or maybe, you know, make it difficult for you in when you're out and about. I think that's probably one of the big tells of having CF.
And the question with that, Caroline?
Just, I mean, how are you, I suppose you can't control what the other people perceive you have, but I suppose it's, you know, again, it's the anxiety and the stress of trying not to cough or cough. Like, is there just, you know, how do you get your head around, okay, I'm coughing because I have CF, I can't care about what everyone else thinks, I suppose.
I suppose that sometimes I don't think, I call it like the card in the back pocket. Sometimes, particularly if they're children and adolescents and stuff like that, they need a sort of a language around that. They need a way of a phrase that they can bring out straight away around that. Because otherwise, if they struggle, like if someone says something to them, they need a sort of a phrase that, you know, coughing is a reflex and you can't do anything about that. You know, something, you need a phrase that you can access fairly straight away, I think. But like, you're always going to, particularly now, like people's other, apart from the CF community, the other community outside of CF, they're aware too that they're stressed, their scanners are up. Like everybody's scanners is up. Everybody's fuse is shortened and everybody's scanners is up. So they're going to be conscious of people coughing in their environment. And that's just the reality. Lorraine, were you going to say something there? I saw your hand going up.
Oh no, I was just playing with something.
Yeah.
No, but I do get that. I do get that. And I can imagine what it's like, you know, as a CF person, you know, cough, and it has to feel uncomfortable. But what I would be saying to Mia now, if Mia came to me and said, oh, mommy, somebody's looking at me because I'm coughing, I'd always tell her to read the situation and to read the people around her. There's times you can make a joke, and I know it's no laughing matter, but there are times you can make a joke, and there's times that you just have to be honest and you'd have to say it's CF, and you do you know, and like there's times it's not playing a CF card, but there are times you have to be honest. And as I said before, at this present time, this is a very different world we're getting into living, and where CF used to be, you know, in our heads, like, and it was very big in our heads, it got a little bit, now I'm talking a little bit smaller because of COVID, because we had so many other things to worry about. And like, I know I have another child, like, and like a lot of people probably listening here have children without CF, and you have to worry about them too. So what I would say to anybody, if you are coughing, read the situation. If you can make light of it, make light of it. And if you need to explain, don't be afraid to explain. That's what I would do.
Great point.
Yeah. So, sorry, you want me to come in? Yeah, I'd be the same. Like, I mean, it's a lifelong experience that you have with CF coughing, and you know, if you're on a bus and you cough and the entire bus turns around to look at you, you know, and you feel so stigmatized and almost ashamed of yourself. But like, you learn to live with the sense that I can't control them. If they want to turn around, let them turn around. As Lorraine said, if it's in a situation where you can make a joke, I might say, someone, don't worry, that's not COVID or something, you know, if it's a few friends, or if it's in a more formal situation, you need to make an explanation, you know, you learn to be able to do that over time, you know, so yeah, don't be afraid to try those strategies. Yeah.
Philip, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, one more question, Caroline, yeah, please.
So just the other one that we had previously discussed as well, which has kind of come up a little bit from work and everything like that. So it was unhealthy habits. And, you know, for us, and I actually spoke to Lorraine about this as well, for us, you know what I mean, you can kind of maybe have been a little bit lazy, go back to the lazy word, you know, with your treatments because you weren't going anywhere. So you have all day to do them, and, you know, or you're in front of the Xbox instead of doing, you know, maybe going out and playing football. So I suppose those unhealthy habits, I mean, how do we break the unhealthy habits like that may have become the norm routine during COVID?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I've taken to coffee, you know, like, so maybe something that you're not, you know, or extra TV or whatever, any of those habits, you know.
Yeah, and I know Mia got a wee bit lazy. She's in the room now with me, but she did get lazy with doing her nebs and doing her physio, and like I mean, there was rows, a lot of them.
So I would think obviously there's a, you know, trying to maintain the protocol, but I often think that would be a challenge anyway, depending on the age and stage of the child. And I just think, for example, the use of Xboxes and stuff like that, they became a real powerful positive tool in a way, because that's how kids connected with other kids. And it's, I know in our house now, it's trying to reduce that level of on-screen time. That's the battle I'm having at the moment as a parent, 2 boys, 13 and 10, that during the period of lockdown, school online and stuff like that. Well, there was no online school really the first time, but the third time round they got it right. And after a week, the device just stopped them. But then it's just that they were too much online, and became a concern for me. So it was like pulling back and trying to say, listen. And they didn't like it. It created rows in the house and stuff like that. So, like, what are we doing here? Like, how do we hit the balance button on this? Because one way it was a way they were communicating across the platforms. In another way, they just were getting sucked into sort of screen time. So it's trying to hit that balance. And I think the first thing is, regardless of, well, your parent is a parent. Like, your job is not necessarily to be the friend of your child, it's to be the parent of your child. And sometimes you're going to make decisions that are not going to be the parent. So, like, for example, the screen in the classroom, they go, I can't change that. That's school policy. That's just reality, and just a factual matter on that.
Just we're going to have to interrupt there and thank everybody. We're just coming to the end of our Zoom time. But I just want to say huge thanks to Eddie. I know everybody on the chat line, and it's, you know, it's lovely to see also so many familiar names on the chats there, and big hello to people like Zoe, Linda, Debbie, Grania, Sharon, Susan, and Adele especially. It was just lovely to hear your involvement, Adele, because I know it's been tough for you over the last few months. So a particular big, huge thanks to you as well. But also, you know, the words of wisdom from Caroline, Rory, and Lorraine. Lovely to see Lorraine from Cavan too, and to thank Mia in the background there too as well. It's been absolutely brilliant. Just to say too, before we finish, that we have another webinar coming up on the 7th of July on accessing accommodation. So one of the good news stories about cystic fibrosis is increasingly our patients are living longer. They're striving towards independent living, and but there are major problems for a lot of people who don't have CF accessing accommodation at the minute. But there are additional problems such as insurance and accessing mortgages and so on. So watch out for that on the 7th of July. It is absolutely fantastic. And I think Nuala is going to put up a screen. Yeah, there it is. Those are our fantastic team of Sam, Caroline, and Rory, who are there for you if you have any problems, whether they're related to anxiety or well-being or indeed any issue. Please ring and engage with them. And a huge thanks to Nuala, who is our Zoom guru and who has done a fantastic job as always. And I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody again at the conference. In fact, we're hoping we're in the midst of organising the proper conference for April of next year. And I really hope to see you all then, and just to thank everybody for their engagement this evening. So thanks very much. And again, a huge thanks to Eddie, and we'll see you at the next webinar, hopefully. Thank you so much, and good evening.